My name is Lilo Armandi, and my ego is a liar. And guess what? Yours is too. I'm a combat veteran, mother, and recovering high performer. This is a show about the lies we tell ourselves, how they shape us, how they break us, and what it takes to finally let them go. Let's uncover our lies to seek the truths underneath. Because before there's clarity, there's chaos. Let's navigate it together. So don your oxygen mask and take a deep breath. Welcome to Lies My Ego Told Me. Welcome back, liars and truth seekers, to another episode of Lies My Ego Told Me. I'm Lilo Armandi. Today's guest grew up in constant movement, from Pakistan to China to New York and Texas. Throughout her life, she watched her parents make constant sacrifices to chase something they could never quite find. Something she also started chasing at a young age: financial security. By the time she was a teenager, she'd made a decision. She would earn her way to it. And she delivered. She climbed faster than almost anyone, made six figures by her early 20s, became the youngest wealth manager at one of the world's most prestigious financial institutions. But the higher she climbed, the less safe she felt and the less stability she found. So she had to ask herself a different question. What if the problem was never the money? What if the real work was internal? Today, Aamina Siddiqui is a financial advisor, educator, and wealth strategist, but her real mission is helping people understand what she discovered: that financial freedom doesn't come from climbing higher. It starts from within. Aamina, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So you have a really interesting relationship with money because you're an expert and been in the business since you were a teenager. You've worked in wealth management, you understand financial systems, you've built a career that's super successful, and it's around helping others build wealth. But there was a narrative that was running beneath all of your expertise and a belief that actually kept you trapped as you climbed higher. So Aamina, tell us, what was the lie that your ego was telling you?
I always believed that if I earned enough money, I'll finally be safe.
So your story is interesting because it doesn't begin in one place. You were born in Pakistan. At the age of 4, your family moves to China. And then in second grade, you moved to New York. And each move that your family makes is supposed to be an upgrade for your life, especially to New York, because your dad finally gets a job working for a major tech company. So tell me what you remember about your childhood.
I was born in Pakistan, lived there for maybe a year and a half before we moved to China. That's where my dad pursued his PhD in computer science from University of Beijing. I think we had a very normal life. We lived in student dorm rooms, my mother, my dad, my brother and I. So it was just the four of us. I didn't go to school back then, so I used to stay at home with our nanny while my dad and my mom went to work. My dad was doing his research and my mom was an arts teacher at a local school. After my dad completed his PhD in China, we moved to Pakistan for a brief period of time where he picked up a role with a local airline company as a computer engineer before we moved to New York in second grade. We used to live in a small town called Pearl River, New York, which was very close to New Jersey. My dad used to work for this company called MCI WorldCom. He was also a computer engineer there. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was highly educated. She had her master's in psychology and economics, and my brother, who was 2 years older than me, was in fourth grade. And then we also had our younger sister. My mom had my younger sister by then as well, who used to stay at home with her, and she would take care of her when we were growing up in New York.
And it's an interesting time that you lived in New York because this is post 9/11. What was that like?
It was very challenging and shocking to me because I didn't know the idea of discrimination and being left out, and the notion that people would judge you based on your skin color or what you look like. So it was a very difficult time because when 9/11 happened, I remember going to school the next day, and all of a sudden, kids are not talking to me. My friends who I used to play with in recess every single day, all of a sudden weren't talking to me. And I also recall my teacher, who used to kind of be our homeroom teacher, make a special request to the principal to move me out of her classroom to another teacher because apparently I was causing a lot of disruption among other kids and parents just because of my skin color. Not because I was saying anything, but because it was creating a lot of chaos among other students. So that was quite heartbreaking.
What did that teach you about security at that age?
I don't know about security, but I certainly did started feeling inferior and less than at a very young age. I felt like I didn't belong. At one point, there used to be during lunchtime where there was a separate table where all the foreign students used to sit, and everyone else who was light skinned or Caucasian used to sit in all the other tables. So it was kind of like the outcast table. And even within the outcast table, I was more of an outcast because I was outnumbered by the other races that were sitting at the table. So I oftentimes just found myself alone eating lunch by myself. I started believing that I was not good enough and less than everyone because of what was going on around me and how people started reacting to me and my family and my background because of this one event.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that you were looking for stability at home, and you seem to have had it until about you are age 11. And what event happens then?
Yeah, so this was during the tech bubble. Two of the big companies went under for audit fraud. So first, you have heard of numerous times, which was Enron. And the number two company that went under was WorldCom, which was the biggest telecommunications back then, as big as AT&T today, for audit fraud as well. They overinflated their profits by almost $11 billion and they were caught. And pretty much the entire company went under, and my dad was one of the engineers to be impacted. A lot changed. We didn't have a lot to begin with because even when my father was working, he was supporting not only us, but he was also supporting his parents and his siblings back home. So we always had to kind of share what was being brought in by our father in terms of his income with other people. So the limited amount that we did have all of a sudden was gone. My childhood in New York was not great by any means. I used to, in my room, I had a mattress on the floor and a packing box that was my side table, and I would cover that with a bed sheet and put all of my books on it. So that was my bedroom. And there was constant chaos in our home because all of a sudden the money that we didn't have, we were living paycheck to paycheck with no savings. That was gone as well. So my parents started arguing and fighting quite often. And I just started retreating more away, given the two big things that have happened, right? So first was 9/11, and now my dad losing his job. So I understood early on to first not ask for help, and second, to never bring in the idea of money or question money because it had a lot of strong emotions tied to it.
How much longer was your family able to sustain life in New York?
Yeah, not for a long period of time. My parents had to make a decision after 4.5 years that we have to move back. And we ended up moving in with our grandparents. And again, that was very challenging. I had to go to schools and be part of a culture that I was not familiar with. I come from a minority group in Pakistan that speaks a different language. It's called Sindhi. There's not that many of us, and our national language is Urdu. And for one of the things in school for you to be successful in is to be able to read and write in Urdu. And obviously I was not good at it I could speak it, but I couldn't read it or write it. So it was quite challenging. The other challenging thing was my family was not religious by any means. We practiced religion very differently from the rest of the people. So that was a further outcast in my community as well. So yeah, it was quite challenging to come back and assimilate with the life there.
Your parents see that life in Pakistan is not working out for you. So eventually your parents make the decision to move you back to the US, and they move you probably farther than they could ever have moved anywhere. And they move you to the great state of Texas. That must have been a massive culture shock for you. Tell me about that.
There was a point where I was constantly doing terrible in school because of the requirements of the curriculum. So they made the decision to move us back to states where obviously the education is much better than what our home country has to offer. So my dad, he picked up a job in Richardson, Texas, and he was a computer engineer with AT&T, surprisingly, another telecom company. And yeah, it was, again, very challenging because I was the new kid. I was always the new kid every single time my parents made the move. And even before I could understand what was going on and get myself assimilated with the life and the kids and try to make new friends, again, we're moving. So, you and I both know how rude and mean girls can be in junior high. So I faced a lot of bullying. I wouldn't say discrimination, but definitely a lot of bullying from the other girls. So again, I found myself alone. I always found solace in books. So I would always carry a book with me. I would eat in the library. And even if I ate in lunch hour in the cafeteria, I would have a book. So books were my friends. It was challenging. And the other thing that happened during that time, my mother decided she wanted to pursue her passion of arts. And while she was going to Art Institute to sign up for a fashion design class, she was T-boned by someone else while she was going there. And she was not doing well for a very long period of time. She couldn't walk. She ended up dislocating her hip, her shoulder, and crushed a lot of her ribs. So she was bedridden for a very long time. I kind of had to step up while my dad, while he was working full time, and be the one who cooks and cleans and takes care of the home, takes care of my mom, as she's recovering. So a lot of stuff was going on during that time. So school was tough in terms of bullying, and then I had to come home and take care of my mom and the situation that we were facing.
And it's like every time your parents are trying to make this one step forward for the security of your family, it's like another thing just takes them down a notch. How are they doing financially at this point?
So, they say when it rains, it pours. Shortly after my father, he was let go again. There was a mass layoff in the tech industry, and he was, again, one of the few people who were impacted. I remember him coming home one day and early, and I didn't make anything of it. And then the next day he was home again. Third day he was home again. And then finally I asked him, I was like, Dad, are you on a vacation? Have you taken some time off? What's going on? And he said, I quit. I left my job. And then many years later, I found out he actually did not quit. It was actually, he was furloughed because of, the tech company realigning their organizations because the economy wasn't doing great again.
And can you talk about how that was affecting your financial stability?
Our mom couldn't work, right? She's still recovering. She's starting to walk by the walker, so she would use that at all times. There were periods of time, my dad lost his job. He did have a little bit of savings, but you burn through savings running a household. And ultimately, we started falling behind. First thing to go was electricity. We couldn't pay the electricity bill. Then at one point, we were behind on our mortgage payments, where we would get letters from the bank threatening us that the house is going to be foreclosed. We didn't have enough food. We would just have enough staples, milk, eggs, and bread to just eat enough and sustain ourselves, but we didn't have anything extra that people say you need to have a good quality of life. It was just survival mode at this point. Ultimately, the house was foreclosed on, so we had to move from that to an apartment because my father had to file for bankruptcy. And when you file for bankruptcy, you have obviously poor credit, and a lot of apartment complexes would not give you housing because of poor credit. So we had to look for a place where credit wasn't an issue, and usually those places are not good by any means. So we ended up living in an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, while I was in high school, surrounded by people who are definitely not family oriented, and that caused a lot of problems and fights again between my parents, because my mother believed that it's all my father's fault because he's the one being constantly impacted by these markets. So it was just a lot of animosity going on between my parents. Again, I'm not doing too well in school. I'm just trying to keep up. A lot of kids in high school, especially girls, they befriend you based on the way you look, the clothes you wear, the car you drive, and the things you have. And I had none of them. So again, I was the outcast, and I didn't have a lot of friends. So it was just a struggle. It was a struggle. It was just survival mode at that point.
How are your parents communicating any of this to you? Are they transparent at all in the struggle? Obviously, you hear them fighting, but do they share with you and talk to you about what's happening?
They did not share the details of it, but the little that they did share was, again, you don't have a job, there's no source of income, money is not coming in, and you know, try to minimize the little expenses that you even have, which weren't that many, but that was pretty much it. And then the next thing always used to be just pray that it gets better, just pray that, you know, one of us ends up finding a job so it gets better. But that was pretty much it when it came to our conversation around money.
By the time you're in high school, you make a decision, and maybe it's not consciously, but it's a decision nonetheless, that you were going to earn your way to safety and security, and you would never let your family be in that position again. So where were you emotionally in those teenage years?
I decided that I had to earn. I had to bring in money and support myself and my family and really go after my goals. I was 16, 17, and I would apply for jobs, you know, as a cashier at Subway, or anything that I would come across, working at Forever 21. That was the big store back then. So I was quite determined. And eventually, when I graduated high school, I got an opportunity to work at a local bank as a teller. And that's when I finally got a little bit of independence and confidence that I can earn money and I don't have to rely on someone else for everything, or not rely on someone else, right? Because I had learned to not ask for help, learn to not ask for things. So finally, at this point, the little money I was getting paid by the hour, the little money that I was making was sustaining me and my lifestyle at that point.
Was college in the dream?
College and education was always something that my parents instilled in me because both of them had higher educations. I sometimes like to joke they're degree rich but money poor. But degrees was always something that, you know, we were pushed to get. So college was definitely something. But unfortunately, I didn't have the money to submit a lot of applications. I remember my dad just gave me enough money to apply to one school, and that's what I did. I ended up applying to University of Texas. That was the only university that I wanted to go to. And surprisingly enough, I got in, even though my grades weren't that good enough. And I believe the only reason that did get me in was my essay. I shared my story and what I've gone through and how I've always, tried to keep my head up and just kept moving forward. And secondly, because I was always the outcast and kind of the rejected in the society, I found solace in books. I read a lot. And when I mean a lot, there was a point where I had read through all the books in the children's section of the library. So my writing became very good. Just marrying those two together got me into UT Austin.
Did you go to UT Austin?
No, so I ended up not going again because of financial situation. I ended up going to a local community college instead where I could pay for school with what I was earning and keep working as a teller.
What was it like to have to give up on your dream?
It was quite sad, but I was not sad for a long period of time because I somehow thought I had made it because I was earning money. I tied success to, yeah, ultimately I'll get that degree because I am in a community college and eventually I'll transfer to a four-year college. But I was just content with what I had because it was the most that I've ever had. I thought that that's just how big my dream was. It was so small. That I just wasn't sad that I gave up on the dream, if that makes sense.
You're holding down this teller job at the bank, right? Even though you were struggling to put
Mhm.
yourself through community college and even have transportation to get there. How were you managing day-to-day life at this point?
Initially, my father would drop me off to work, but then at the same time, I started college as well. Then it got difficult to coordinate the hours between the two. So while all of this was happening, there was always constantly turmoil and something going on. The car that my brother used to drive in his college stopped working. So he came back home one day, and my dad ended up the one car that we did have, our one means of transportation to him, which he ended up driving back to Houston. And then we were left with nothing. So now we're out of a car all of a sudden. I can't get to work. I can't go to college. So my father, he reached out to one of his old friends who used to own a funeral home, and he had a lot of hearse. So he let him borrow one of his hearse, and he said just use that until the situation, you get a job and everything's back to normal and you can get a car again. So that's what I rode in to to school and work. So if you know what a hearse looks like, there's just a driver's seat. Sometimes there's a passenger seat, but in this one there wasn't, of course. In the back, there's a bench and then a big area in the middle where the casket goes. So I would sit in the back, and I can tell you it did not smell good in there. It smelled like strong chemicals. And I would tell my dad to just park super far from school where no one's looking, and I would come out the back and go to school. So that was quite memorable as well. So I had to rely on that transportation until I had enough money to buy my first car, which was only $3,000, but I did buy it and ultimately save and get a car.
You don't stay a teller for very long. You actually start getting promoted. Was this the first time that you experienced personal success? And what was the motivating factor that you had?
So when you're a teller, you can choose to be in one of two locations. You can be a lobby teller, or you can be a drive-through teller. So the older tellers who have been tenured and working for the bank for a very long time did not want to work the drive-through. They wanted to sit in the lobby and look nice and service those clients. I was 18, 19 at the time. Again, no confidence to stand up for myself, was kind of put in the back to work the drive-through because a lot of cars come, and if if there used to be hours where there was so much traffic where multiple money tubes would come, and you were just in sheer chaos trying to manage it all. So I was placed in the back. But one good thing I think came out of that was I was able to juggle a lot in one period of time, manage stress and keep up with everything. And then second, I started selling our banking products in the drive-through. So people who would come to deposit checks and money, I had the opportunity to look at their accounts and see what they had, what they didn't have. I started conversations with them. There were a lot of people who would come often. It was funny because even though I had a title of a teller during that time, I ended up becoming the number one or number two banker because I was selling banking products as a teller.
Do you think that you thrived in that environment because you were always in a constant state of stress growing up? You mentioned that there was always turmoil. Or is that almost your comfort zone?
Yes. My body did not know any other state of being but to be in constant stress and turmoil and looking for a way out. And the culture of that bank was exactly like that. But I think the good thing came out with what had happened in my childhood and was happening in my home was to learn how to juggle everything, internalize it, and just keep moving forward. I think the other thing that was fueling me was not failing on my own terms, because before I could easily point a finger at someone else. Now I didn't have the option. Now I could only point a finger to myself. So I kind of made a commitment to succeed in whatever situation I was in.
I mean, sometimes fear is an incredible motivation, right? People run faster than they ever have before when they're scared for their life, right? Because you had this intrinsic motivation to want to have a better circumstance, but you also had, this fear of failure, to not be able to point the finger at anybody else. And it's a very cutthroat environment in the banking world. But for context, you end up being at the top number one or number two out of like 30,000 employees, right? Not just correct. Your bank, like the entire corporation, which is incredible. How were you affected internally while you're climbing so fast, because you're experiencing success, but it's not really like an enjoyable success? And was the security of your job tied to how much you could produce?
The culture of the bank was very goals driven, right? Very, very revenue driven, and what you're producing more than how you're servicing and speaking with clients. Less client centric, but more corporate driven. Yes, I was successful, but I had to do things that weren't comforting by any means. My manager at the time would come to me and tell me, here are a bunch of paper applications. I want you to walk across the street in the gas station and talk to every single person that walks through the door and see if they want to open a bank account or get a credit card. She made me go inside a Chipotle once, Church's Chicken once, back in the kitchen. And I think that was a low blow when I was forced to go inside a kitchen in the Church's Chicken place to talk to the cook back there, the line cook. And the way he spoke to me was quite demeaning and disrespectful. I think that was really what awakened me from this trance of, this is what life is, and I just have to keep doing this to be successful. At that point, I realized that I need to get out of here and things need to change. That's when I left my job at the bank and ended up concentrating more in school and transferred to University of Houston to put more emphasis on my education, because that was not the way I foresaw my life and foresaw that I wanted to live like that or continue living like that.
And so you finish school, and at age 24, you end up continuing to work in the world of finance. And you go to one of the biggest major international financial institutions. You become the youngest person there to hold a position in wealth management. You're making six figures right off the bat. You now have a title, you have money, you have office with a view. And this is supposed to be the moment where everything changes. And when you start feeling safe because you are now in a position to secure financial independence. And what's interesting is that there's this song that I love from Notorious B.I.G. that says more money, more problems. And research backs that up. So studies from the US, the UK, and Canada show that people who experience sudden mass wealth, whether it be from an inheritance, an insurance claim, or most notably lottery winners, they go broke within 3 to 5 years because an influx of wealth, in addition to a lack of financial literacy, and that means the lack of an internal framework to manage that wealth, equals disaster. And for you, you do have a financial understanding, but you've never really had financial safety or comfort. So paint us a picture of what your life was like during this time when you started to come into all of this money.
I graduated college and I joined this firm, and I am one of the youngest and probably the only female financial advisor, financial planner in the office. And now all of a sudden I am interacting with, meeting very successful people, either if it's investors or clients or my colleagues. And everyone would walk in with the most expensive suits, wearing Rolex, most expensive perfumes, in their all glass offices. So there's kind of a tie, I guess, an association with what you have and the way you look and the way you carry yourself is tied to being successful. So that's what I started emulating. I got the idea that why would anyone would take advice from me because I don't look successful? Why would a $10 million, $5 million client want to talk to me because I'm driving a old Honda Accord and not wearing a Rolex watch? So quickly, I got into debt very fast because I was living way above my means. I couldn't afford a Rolex, but I went and bought a $500 watch, a $600 watch, 10, 20 times. I went and leased a top of the line Audi. I got the best suits, best shoes, jewelry, everything that you can think of for me to portray to the world that I have made it and I'm successful, but it's the opposite is true.
And was there pressure to keep up that appearance? Was that internal or external?
I would say it was a bit of both, because the way the culture of the company was, you have to act, behave, and look a certain way for you to be successful. I had to put on this persona of being this aggressive, kind of like a man in suits, and talking a certain way, creating this dominance over clients and individuals to show that I know more than you. Also, I had to back up what I was talking by showing that I am successful by having these things, because that's what people see see initially when they're judging you. They don't know how much money they have in the bank, but they see what car you drive, what shoes you wear, and what purse you carry to kind of tie a value to you and see if they should listen to you. Yes, there was pressure from the outside, but inside I thought that's what life meant as well, that whatever I was doing and what I had was wrong, and the way I was inherently was wrong, because I haven't been successful in the past. So I had to be someone who I was not to be seen successful.
Did you feel like you were cosplaying what a successful person would be? Because you clearly knew how to make money for your clients.
Yes.
How come you couldn't figure out how to make money for yourself?
Yeah, 100%. I became someone who I wasn't. And there was a point where I kind of started feeling it in my bones. Like it's a weird feeling to describe. I was kind of going against the grain of who I am inherently. And inherently as an individual, I'm very compassionate and emotion driven, very introverted. And I being forced to be aggressive and to live above my means again, which I wasn't. So I was being forced to do that. I had all the knowledge and expertise that the industry required to be successful and help manage my clients. I was telling them exactly the opposite of what I was doing, which is hypocritical, right? I would sit across individuals and judge them and say, you are not successful because you're not doing A, B, and C. But that's exactly what I was doing, and even worse. We can have all the spreadsheets, all the numbers, and know how to work a calculator and all of that. But if we don't truly work internally and look at our emotions and what drives our reaction to money and how we approach it, it's two different things.
Yeah. Because you have the knowledge, you have the income on the paycheck, but instead of feeling safer, you're more trapped than ever. Because what were some of the things that you started to realize that you were hiding or denying or dissociating from?
So I accrued a lot of debt. So I had a auto note, credit card debt. I did live with my parents, so thankfully I didn't have to worry about rent. So even though I should be saving a lot, I'm spending all of it. And I would keep telling myself that, yeah, it's okay if there's debt as long as I'm making minimum payments, or I would convince myself that eventually I'm going to get this big windfall either through a promotion or a big bonus, or somehow I'm going to come into money and I'm going to pay it all off. So it's okay. Oftentimes we judge ourselves based on our intention, and that's what I was doing. And we judge other by their actions. And again, that's what I was doing when I was interacting with our clients, right? Mm-hmm. So again, the hypocrisy of that all was just too funny now that I think about it.
But you're making money for your company. And after 4 years at that company, you actually end up getting a job offer at another financial institution. And this ends up being one of your biggest career moves, because it's not only moving up in your career, it's also a geographic move. And you end up moving from Houston to Atlanta. And for the first time in your life, you are completely alone. The first time living by yourself, you don't have any family. There's no safety net. There's no excess noise around you. What happened to you when you finally broke free from the world that you had known since your childhood and the one that you were so deeply embedded in?
When I moved to Atlanta, it was right before the pandemic, before the world shut down, and a lot of the noise and chaos kind of around everyone kind of stopped. Now I am in this new state with no family, no means to go into an office to interact with my colleagues, and the little friends that I did have back home, now I don't have friends anymore. And now all of a sudden I'm at home by myself and left with my thoughts. That was the point in my life where I truly started looking at everything from a microscopic lens and trying to understand everything that happened in my life, right? How would your parent losing their job or applying for bankruptcy affect me as an individual? And how would that make me react in certain situations? So I truly looked at every single situation in my life and tried to understand, why is it the way I am, and why did I approach money a certain way? Why did I approach things a certain way? And just inherently looked at the things, that were going wrong in my life and what was causing it. It was a lot of self-reflective work. And one of the biggest questions I asked myself was, why do I keep ending in the same situation over and over again? What am I doing wrong and what needs to change? And once I got my answer, that's when I made the decision to change and continue to change myself as I, live every single day.
And you said to me once, you said, I didn't actually make it. I'd faked it the whole time. And you realized that it wasn't money that was the problem. It was the beliefs that you had grown up with and the understanding that you'd brought your parents' patterns of behavior regarding money around you. Did you find that there was shame around the discussions of money, whether it be good or bad, whether it's
being successful or being in debt, were you able to kind of take a step back and reevaluate your relationship, whether good or bad, with those dollar signs?
I realized the patterns, what my parents did, but what they were doing in their situation, perhaps they needed to do that, but I didn't need to, right? So I thought, why did I have the notion that it's okay for me to continue to buy these things, rake up credit card debt, do the minimum payments, and eventually I'm going to get a windfall and I'm going to pay it off. But if I looked at my parents' situation, right, they didn't have a source of income, but they had to live and sustain themselves and provide a life for their kids. So for them, it's okay if they got into a little bit of credit card debt, because if they didn't, we're not going to eat. They were not living above their means. They were just doing enough to sustain themselves. They didn't even have the finance knowledge. They didn't have any of that. And I did. What I was doing was much worse than what they did. So yes, there was a lot of fake it till you make it until you couldn't. And I quickly realized I needed to change course before things took a turn for the worse.
And one of the behaviors that you fell back on that I think is actually one of the best traits that you have is that you kind of lost yourself in books again. You start reading voraciously about finance in a completely different way. And you do this internal work. And you mentioned to me that one of the most important books that you read is The Psychology of Money. And there's a quote from the book that really hits home. And it says, "Your personal experiences with money maybe make up 100 millionth of a percent of what's happening in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works." That slice of an experience that you have from your childhood, it shapes your entire operating system, and it explains so much, not only about your story, but so many of our own stories when it comes to our relationship with money. And you witnessed your parents' financial struggles and their collapse and then the getting up again. But that's the tiniest fraction of the global financial history. But it overwhelmingly became how you thought about money and safety and survival. When you first read that book, and specifically that quote, did it feel like someone had turned on the light? And how did that understanding shift what you were going to do about it and empower you?
I actually read this book twice. So the first time I read it, I didn't think anything of it because it was just words on paper. And I said, okay, there's another finance book. But when I truly started doing the work on myself and looking at all the broken pieces and my habits and what I was doing and realizing a pattern and what was wrong. So when I picked up that book the second time around, everything just resonated and it was a home run. Before I got into the books, I started doing a lot of inner work. So before, I wouldn't look into my accounts. I wouldn't look at my statements. I wouldn't look at, how much debt I had, because honestly, I was scared. I was scared to look. And if I did look, I would beat myself up for it. I would put myself down and tell myself again that I wasn't good enough. So it was kind of a vicious cycle. I had such strong negative emotions to money that I kind of just put it under the rug. When I told myself that at the end of the day, I am a human with emotions and I'm not a spreadsheet, right? And I've had a lot of turmoils and ups and downs in life that I had to face, and there was a driving force that made me behave this way. I allowed to give myself grace. When I gave myself grace, that's when I finally was able to calm my anxiety and nerves when it came to looking at my own finances. So I finally started, opening up my books, my statements, everything to see what was truly going on and what I can change. So that truly allowed me to get out of the negative scarcity mindset, the negative emotion that I had around money, and just leading with grace that allowed me to approach books and knowledge in a different manner than I had in the past.
You have an abundance of knowledge in wealth management, but so much of your behavior was shaped by trauma, not your education. So talk to me about the moment that that belief shifted from fear-based to abundance-based, and you finally started feeling I'm safe with my money-making decisions.
If you are to go to a wealth advisory firm tomorrow, they'll ask, how much money do you have and how can we manage it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they lead with. But I didn't have that. My foundation was broken. I didn't know how to save, how to budget, and how to do all of those things. So I would jump to point, if we were to put things on a scale of how they need to be done, I would be sitting at 0.9, but I had to be at level 1 to be able to even get to that point, right? So my knowledge and expertise that I had didn't come in until much later. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the knowledge to solidify my foundation and how to build it. And that usually comes from parents teaching it to you from schools. Unfortunately, our schools do not teach you how to save and budget. So I had to first understand that I did not have the knowledge. My foundation was broken. I cannot build a tower until I lay a foundation, or else it's going to topple over every single time. Mm-hmm. And that was a bit of an ego blow too, right? Here I was telling the world that I have all this knowledge, certifications, and accolades in the world of finance and wealth management, but I don't know about budgeting. I don't know about savings. And I had to face that truth. Once I understood what worked for me and what didn't, and how psychology and emotions were playing into that, everything changed for me.
And what was the first step that you took to digging yourself out of debt and building abundance in your life?
Yeah, so the first thing, I had to change the mindset of people value you based on what you have, right? You can't look at someone who is driving a Porsche and say, this person is successful, I want to be like them. Mm-hmm. Now, if I look at someone today, right, if someone's driving a Porsche, I don't automatically assume that he's rich. That's why he can afford a Porsche. The only data point I have on him is he has less $100,000 in the bank than he did. That's the only data point I have on him. So I started disassociating materialistic things from success and wealth. And then the second thing was I had a gold mine in front of me and I wasn't utilizing it. I was working with some of the most successful investors and people, and I could learn from them, and I chose not to. So I can learn from their habits. I can learn from their patterns and what they were doing to make them successful. I also had access to people who were not successful, right? Because those people come through your door as well for help as well. So I was able to recognize patterns amongst uber rich and not so successful people. And I started doing what they were doing in my own life. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I did was I told myself that I had to get out of debt. And it took me a little less than a year to get out of debt. I got rid of my car, got rid of the Audi, gave it back. I stopped buying unnecessary things. I subscribed from memberships that I weren't using, right? Expensive gym memberships. And I created a system. So I knew what my shortcomings are, right? I wasn't disciplined enough to save every month, but I created a system where it did it for me. So the minute my paycheck would come in, it was divided into three parts. One was to pay off debt, one was to save, and the other was to live on.
Mm-hmm.
So I had these three accounts, and over time, that system was just running in the background. And it's so simple. You just set up a simple ACH and it does it for you, and you don't have to think about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once that engine was going, it kind of snowballed into many things. My debt got paid off. I was living better and below my means. And third, I had money in savings that was automatically being reinvested in the market as well. Now I was finally getting to use the knowledge that I had after all these years in my own financial situation.
Mm-hmm.
It truly changed my perspective on money in general.
So, Aamina, what is your truth now?
My truth is to be happy with what you have, but also keep pursuing what truly brings you happiness. That's my truth. So I live way below my means now. That doesn't mean that I don't want to have a certain level of lifestyle. I just don't keep up with the Joneses. And I do things and I do spend money on that brings me true joy. And that is books, painting, and traveling. So I go all out on that. But everything else, I limit myself. I won't say to an extreme ends, but I do limit it. Because money to me is first, it's not scarce by any means. There's a lot of money and there's tons of money out there. Second, money is a tool not to buy things, but to give me flexibility and time in the future if I need it.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, if I decide that I don't want to work, which I don't think would ever be the case if I don't want to work. But if I don't want to work and just pursue my other goals, I know I have that. So that gives me a lot of confidence and happiness in life.
Do you feel like you found safety in your finances now?
100%. It took a long way and a long time to get here. I needed to do a lot of inner work, reflective work, and to forgive those around me and forgive myself to reach this point. And I do feel that I have reached a point where I'm able to sustain a very good lifestyle, and I'm happy to see what the future brings. And not only that, I can use my knowledge and experience to help those around me in similar situations or in not so similar situations, because this is what I've truly become passionate about.
And you're teaching other people how to do this. You have a passion for teaching women about financial independence and their wealth management, because you're not just teaching them how to make more money, you're teaching them something different. So what are you actually helping them discover, and what's the framework you're using to break this pattern for other people?
Yeah. So one thing I discovered was how women approach money and how men approach money is completely different. I had to put on this persona of being this aggressive man when I wasn't, right? I had kind of put my emotions aside to kind of come in as this superior person who knows all the financial jargons and knows all the math to show you that I know what I'm talking about. You should trust me and let's go ahead and do it. That's now how women make decisions when it comes to money. We're more emotions driven, right? So when I kind of change my personality to be more inherently who I am as an individual and as a woman, that allowed me to interact with other women better when it came to managing their wealth. The other thing I noticed was when it came to wealth management, a lot of wives, daughters, and women in general were being left out of the conversations, or they didn't plan for their finances or retirement by any means. And they're the ones that are most impacted when we look at longevity risk, right? Women outlive men by by numerous years, yet they are not part of the conversations, and then they're not planning for retirement or outliving their money. Second, there are more single moms than there are single dads out there. And again, women are not planning. They're not planning for their financial security. Third, we end up taking care of our aging parents. Daughters end up taking care of their aging parents, and they're not part of the conversation. They're not talking about money. Fourth, we take care of our kids. We decide where they go to school, what activities, what other curriculum they should be part of, and how we should be managing all of that. Again, they're not part of the conversation. So it was quite astonishing to me how I used to sit in these rooms with these big corporations, and if a husband wife is sitting there, both of the the couple is sitting there, the financial advisor is only talking to the guy and not to the girl or to the woman, right? So I made the conscious decision that I was the one who was going to change. First, I'm going to lead with emotion and understand where they're coming from, what their goals are. And most of the goals are tied to emotions, right? My goals are to take care of my parents. I want to travel. Why? Because it makes me feel happy, right? I want to perhaps start a business because I believe in this cause or in this product or service that the world should have. Just approaching money in a slightly different way with more emotion driven helps me connect with women in a better stance.
What is one piece of advice you would have told yourself back then to put yourself on a path to success 10 years earlier than you did?
It's funny because I would not do anything differently. I would approach life more with open arms and say, okay, whatever is happening for a reason, and that's okay. And the only thing I would not do is have a lot of stress and negativity around the situation, but I wouldn't change anything because I truly believe life happens for you and not to you. And I think all of this needed to happen for me to be who I am today and be the version of who I am today. Because it wasn't taught to me, life taught it to me. And I'm grateful for that.
And to the kid that's working after school, trying to help mom pay the bills, trying to reach for their dreams, what is one piece of financial advice that you would give them that they could do today to start working towards a bigger future?
Yeah. As boring as it may sound, I have seen people who are not making a lot of money end up becoming better savers and investors because they choose to live below their means. Even if you could save maybe $50 a month, $10 a month, start there because it rewires your brain to keep doing that. And when that time does come, when you are able to save more, you will do it because that's just who you have become over time. So just live below your means for a certain period of time. And then there would come a time in your life where you can live a lifestyle that you wish to live.
Yeah. Pay yourself first, right? Even if it's the tiniest amount. So before you go, we have a closing ritual and it's called Truth Be Told. So I'm going to give you a statement and you just tell me truth or lie. Money can buy you happiness.
That's a tough question. No, money cannot buy you happiness. Because I'll give you an example. When I bought the Audi, right, I was probably happy for a week.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't.
Yeah.
What truly brings you happiness, which is also associated with money, is the security it brings, not the things it buys.
Yeah.
I would say it's a lie.
Sometimes your parents' failure is your greatest gift.
That is very true.
My self-worth is greater than my net worth.
Very true. Yes.
Biggie was right. More money, more problems.
Yes. More money, more problems.
And last one, I do it all again.
100%. I am grateful for everything that happened. It taught me, and yeah, it was just the catalyst I needed in life to be able to move forward. Because without these situations, I would have been sitting and doing exactly the things that I was doing before. So yes, I would do it all over again.
Aamina, thank you for being here and for your radical honesty about something that can be a very taboo subject. Your story doesn't let us hide behind the illusion that money fixes anything. And you've shown us that real wealth isn't in the paycheck, but in the internal freedom to actually feel secure, to know you're enough, regardless of what's in your bank account. And that's not just your truth. That's the truth that you're spending your life helping other people, especially women, discover. So for anybody who's listening, who's making good money but feeling broke, who's climbed higher but felt more afraid, you're not alone. And more importantly, there is another way. To learn more about Aamina's coaching, her work as a financial advisor, or how to begin your own journey toward financial freedom from the inside out, you can find her on LinkedIn at Aamina Sid. If you want to explore your own relationship with money and the beliefs you inherited, check out the resources page on liesmyego.com, where you'll find all the life-changing book recommendations from Aamina's journey, as well as the articles on scarcity mindset, generational wealth, and financial healing. If you love this podcast, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and share this episode with someone who's making the money but still feels broken, because they need to know they're not alone and there's a way forward. Aamina, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.